All right, here we are again, Kimball Clark and James Tanner. We're going to be discussing a new video with Kindex. And um, this particular video, I'm going to try to make it short, but I want to explain the importance of file enrichment. So a lot of our customers get their documents, their photos, their 8 millimeter reels, the 8 millimeter film digitized, and they say, "Yay, I'm done." And as much as I think that that's a wonderful thing, it's a huge important thing. In fact, it's one of the greatest bottlenecks of our time, I would say, is digitizing your analog material. Once it's digitized, our goal at Kindex is to enrich those files. And what this particular discussion will be today is why that's important. And it is, in my opinion, the next logical step to any digital file. Okay. And so that's what we're going to be discussing today is file enrichment and why Kindex's approach is so epic. All right. So, James, do you have any questions before I launch into this little presentation?
No, I'm fascinated to find out. I'm making a lot of assumptions as you say that about what I would consider to be enrichment, but we'll see how that works.
So, for now, Kindex is focused on five categories. Again, documents, volumes, images, audio, and video. So let's talk a little bit more about what those categories mean. So file types are important to establish categories. I think that for those of you who understand file types will understand, why this file type associates more with this category and that file type associates more with that category, so on and so forth. So JPEGs, PDFs, PNGs, and GIFs, these are typically file types, as you can see here, that are related to documents, volumes, and images, okay? We also allow bitmaps. I didn't put that on there. Bitmap is a very kind of a rare file that we see on occasion. And back in the day, if you remember, I think one of the primary file formats was bitmap when computers just began. So really, it's five file types that we allow for documents, volumes, and images in Kindex. And you might be asking, well, why don't you allow, say, PSDs if I have a Photoshop document or a RAW file if I have a really nice camera that shoots RAW? Well, the answer to that is simple. We are software as a service. We happen to work in the web and we happen to work in a browser. And because we work in a browser is limited to certain file types. So these are the file types that browsers can read with no problem. And that's why we're focusing on these. So when it comes to audio and video, you'll see that we have MP3 and M4A for audio, and we have MP4 for video. MP4 is probably one of the most broadest, one of the more broad video file types out there for browser compatibility. That's why we focus on MP4, audio, MP3, and M4A. If you're wondering what an M4A is, that is the type of file that you get when you record with your iPhone or maybe with your Android device when you just record an audio recording. It comes out as an M4A, not as an MP3. Okay, so those are actually readable in the browser, in most browsers. Okay, so these are all these file types I'm presenting here are readable in all browsers. Okay, so if you have material outside of that, a file type, let's say you have a whole bunch of Word documents. The question is, well, can we upload Word documents into Kindex? The answer is, yeah, save them as PDFs. Okay, for now. Now, will we jump into the business of, making your file, forcing your files into PDFs and forcing them into this? Probably, but not right now. So in the time being, just go ahead and export all your Word docs as PDFs. Export your XLS files as PDFs. Your Word doc, let's see, Word Perfect documents as PDF. Okay, and then they'll be readable in Kindex. Any questions on that, James?
No, I think that's, well, obviously I have a great, extensive background in imaging and all of that. So, no, that's very simple, and I would have explained it the same way. I
Yeah.
think that these are the common ones that are usable. If you go into any other, for instance, you mentioned camera raw. Camera raw is kind of a photographer's dream. It just downloads the entire contents of whatever the camera has. Unfortunately, then those camera raw images almost 100% need to be somehow manipulated and saved in another format in order to be useful. So it's not a
Condensed, right?
yeah, there's nothing about the camera raw that prevents it from being used other than the fact that it's right now not supported except for transferring information. So you would put it into for instance, camera raw would go into Photoshop and you would be able to save it out. In Photoshop, you'd end up saving it out as a TIFF file, which then you would have to convert to a JP3 or a JPEG.
Correct. And that's exactly right. And I think in time we might have some different parameters for, maybe preserving the original file that you upload and then, exporting it at least for your view temporarily as a JPEG or something like that. But for now, that's a little bit too much right now. We're focusing primarily on the file types that are readable by browsers. Now, video, for example, there's all kinds of video files, as we all know, AVI, MPEG, MOV, all kinds of files. And we actually can use these files in our system. The problem is they're not loadable again in the browser. So this becomes really problematic for Kindex when someone's trying to transcribe spoken audio in a video file and it's not visible in the browser. You see that's a problem. So we have to encourage our customers to export them into these file formats so that they work in Kindex.
Yeah. And
Okay.
online there are a number of conversion programs, mostly free. There's a lot of free ones that will convert a WAV file, for example, to a MP4 or whatever you want it to
Right.
be.
Yeah, and for example, we had a customer bring in a CD full of WAV files and I think AIFF, if I recall correctly, just all these different audio types. And even if you have an Apple computer and you have your music or iTunes program, you can actually export as
Yeah.
an MP3 as well. So there are different ways to do that. But again, at the end of the day, the goal in Kindex is to make data accessible. And as it's more accessible, then it's more usable and more fruitful for the greater story of life, of history. Okay. And so the more you are saying, I'm just going to hold it in this format, the less accessible you're making your data. And so the whole point of this conversation today is basically epic file enrichment. And the enrichment element is what we're going to talk about next, why Kindex is so good at enriching your data. So first off, we like to, in Kindex, provide you the opportunity to load in all your extraneous metadata about your records when you upload them. So that's actually in the process of uploading. So let me give you a quick example of that in Kindex. When I add a record in Kindex and I upload it from my computer, what you're able to do here is you're able to put in manually all the fields that you feel are important or valid as it relates to that record, the single record, or multiple records at once. So let's break this down. The Kindex collection wherein it resides, okay? That's an important element of library science where you would actually position this record in your entire archive, okay, where its location is. This attached to field is really unique. It's actually related to family search. So when you want to attach a record to a particular individual in family search, you can actually do that using the family search ID. Now, what does it do for family search? Well, that's forthcoming. The goal is to share the derivative transcription.
Recording.
The goal is to share the derivative transcription from your record back to family search as a memory. Okay. And so that's what this is enabling you to do at some point. That is a feature that is not yet there, but if you want to get things loaded in now, you can certainly do that by adding in the family search ID, knowing that once that's transcribed, it can actually be shared back to family search. This is a really cool feature that we intend to do at some future day, but it's simply forthcoming at this point in time. The next element, as I said, we divide records into 5 categories. You simply select the kind of category that this is in. This is a document of a city directory, so I'm going to simply say that it is a document or maybe a volume because it was from a bound material. So anytime a record is from a bound item, we call that a volume item. Okay, so you could mark this as a volume, maybe not so much as a document. And then, of course, you can put in the description. You might say, this is a phone directory page. Okay, and then we put in the creator. And let's just say I happen to know the phone directory company back in the day, at least where I was growing up, called Car Publishing Company. And that was the creator of it. And then the subject keywords, we could call this a phone directory, comma, phone numbers, comma, indexes of phone numbers, or whatever keywords you think that are relevant to that particular document. These are entities that we will talk about at the very end of this video today. Provenance is very important. Where did you find this material? Well, it just happens to be under Leland's mattress, okay, or wherever it is. This is in Kimball's attic, located at Kaysville, Utah. Now, it doesn't necessarily imply, provenance doesn't necessarily imply the present location, but maybe how you obtained it. But we have people typing in really whatever they want in the provenance field. So maybe this was given to me by my father when he passed away, right? And then, of course, the date is a field that you could put in. Typically, what our customers use here is the date of creation. And then the place wherein this originated. I happen to actually work for a car publishing printing company, so I can go ahead and say that I know this is in Bountiful, Davis, Utah, and I can update the record. Now, if I look at that particular record, I can look at its properties. And so this is an example of extraneous metadata related to this record. Now, extraneous metadata is not to be confused with a file's native metadata, okay? Right?
Well, if you to understand metadata, it's very simple. If you have a smartphone or a camera on your phone, if you take a picture with your camera and it's associated with a date, that's metadata. In other words, when you look at your list of photos in your iPhone or in your Android phone and it's all there by date, then you have already put in metadata, but that's considered your next category of metadata, and that's native metadata because it's attached at the time that the image is created.
Right. Let's talk a little bit now about native metadata of a file. This particular file has some native metadata. So again, if I go to record info in Kindex, and how I do that is I just simply click on this record info if I'm in the transcription screen. If I'm in the gather screen, I go back to all records, and I can click on any record that I want. Let's say that one, and I can say record info, okay? We have these little tabs of metadata, properties, and auto indexed. So the extraneous metadata is listed here, and then the native metadata is listed here. Native metadata is the data that's associated with the file itself, okay? This is stuff that you have no idea exists, really, until you put it into Kindex and you see it, or until you bring it into your computer and you look at your property details, okay? You just don't know that it exists until you go here. So this has a broken down into how many megapixels this image is, what's the image size is, what's the image width and height in pixels, okay? Some of you may have GPS coordinates in your images, okay? So metadata is really, really important because it can be searched as well. And so there are some elements in Kindex of metadata that we allow you to search. Now, on that note, metadata can be a little bit of a security problem because you can actually break down someone's computer file structure by looking at the metadata. So what we do in Kindex is we give the archive owner the ability to say, you know what? I don't want to reveal any record metadata, and I choose to opt out, okay? So it says here that it risks revealing each record's location, date, time, details about the originating file system, device, author information. And so by default, you do not reveal any record metadata when you sign up for Kindex. But if you're okay with sharing a record's metadata, you can certainly click this and choose to opt in. Remember, the more data that you share related to your records, the more easy it is to be found, the more easy it is to be shared, the more open and transparent you are to the world about your data. The more restrictive you are, the less you'll be able to find it, the less data you'll be able to share, etc. Now, this is particularly important to not reveal any record metadata, probably if you have a public archive. Okay. If you have a private archive, I say go ahead and reveal all, because the private archive is limiting you to who you choose to opt in to look at that data. So you get to determine the crowd base that's looking at your data. Okay. So that's a really important element, and that you all need to understand, is that we give you the ability to opt out of revealing your native metadata or opt in. That's probably something you didn't know about, James, until just today, right?
Nope, didn't know that.
Okay. So that's a pretty cool feature. So native metadata is actually valuable, has some relevance in file enrichment. Now let's move on to the other component of what we're extracting from a file, the content itself. Now, this is where our auto index element comes into play. What sets Kindex apart from all other entities out there that I know of is the fact that we can automatically extract data from the content itself. So let's just give you an example. If I have a document, let's suppose it's my diploma from my high school graduation, okay? It can automatically recognize all typewritten text and even handwriting. So let's suppose my principal has a really nice signature. It could actually figure out the name of my principal, okay? And I think it was Dr. Poor was his name. So if Dr. Poor has a good signature, it'll actually interpret that properly, both the handwriting and the typewritten text, okay? And no doubt it has probably his typewritten name underneath his signature to boot. So that's very helpful. So Kindex can actually do both of those things, as OCR, reading type, and handwriting, recognizing handwriting. So that's the auto index element. Now, once it's read that text, you can go in and you can perfect the text in Kindex. The same would happen with volumes, whether it's handwritten or typewritten. And if you recall, in one of the last videos we did, James, we had journals of handwritten documents, right? Did a pretty good job with that, with handwriting.
Yeah. Oh yeah, did really good job.
I was very impressed. In fact, like I've said, I have been looking at handwriting recognition services for years, hoping that someday we would find a good one, and we finally did last year. So that was really exciting to finally see a service that could actually perform to the level of a standard that I was excited to see. The next element that we do that as relation to auto indexing is image captioning. So when it comes to your JPEGs, PDFs, PNGs, and GIFs that are just solely images, okay, let's say me standing in front of a waterfall, it will caption that image and say, we have a man in his middle-aged years standing in front of a waterfall that is, appears to be rather tall, or whatever. So it'll explain exactly what's going on in the image. It'll count how many people are there. It might give you a time frame as to when it thinks that this image was snapped. But this is a really helpful element, because now those of you who have libraries and libraries of photos, you can now retrieve whatever you want by typing in waterfall, and all your waterfall images will come up, right? And so on and so forth. And that's very nice. And in some future day, hopefully we can do facial recognition in Kindex, something that we haven't not yet embraced, because we want to get the groundwork for first of the actual caption of the image. And that's automated as well. Now, audio and video is speech to text. We don't necessarily explain what's going on in a video just yet. But what we're doing is we're extracting all spoken audio from a video file, or spoken audio, obviously, from an audio file, and pushing that to text too. Presently, Kindex works best with the English language, okay, when it comes to the audio and video. It does not work well with Portuguese, Spanish, another language we've already tried, and it's actually kind of funny to hear the English derivatives of what it's thinking is being said in English when it's all spoken in a foreign language. But
Uh,
but anyway, for now we're using speech to text. So it's important though to see what's going on here. I mean, all of these file types are automatically extracting all of this content itself, the actual substantive content in a document is being pulled out by virtue of just clicking a few buttons in Kindex. Now, the extraneous metadata is going to be entered by you because you happen to know that data. AI doesn't. And I hopefully there's never a day that it will know automatically where that came from because that kind of terrifies me. If it happens to know all of that. But for now,
yeah.
you're going to have to plug in the extraneous metadata and then let the rest of the stuff happen automatically from native metadata on down, which is really cool because we've eliminated that bottleneck of transcription in Kindex. So that's very powerful. So yeah, that's essentially how Kindex enriches your files. And so James, one of the things that I want customers to understand is that a file in and of itself has value. Okay. Just as much as it's nice to have that original record of, say, great great grandpa who, maybe his will or his, a certain contractual record or maybe a journal entry, that's no doubt important. But once you digitize this data, it actually has additional historical elements to it that you can actually glean more important information from that you would otherwise not even have with that physical record. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make these records more valuable instead of just being random digital files on your computer. And so that's what you've seen here today is the ability for Kindex to extract extraneous metadata, native metadata, content itself, and then of course making that all searchable.
Mhm.
So now to end this presentation, I do need to talk a little bit about entity extraction. Once that data is derived or extracted from that text, whether it be metadata, whether it be that extraneous data like properties, like such as author, or the actual transcription, you can actually look at all the persons, places, dates, and events that are loaded into our system as it relates to that particular bit of data. Now we have all these names automatically being pulled out of all of that data. So if I want to see where Marshall Franklin Allen was listed, I can click on that name and I can find where Marshall Franklin Allen was listed. And it will tell me that it's derived from the transcription of this record, not the properties and not the metadata, but the transcription itself. Okay. So that's how that would work. If I want to go back and look at another name, let's see, Joe Anderson. Okay. And this again is related to the transcription, or in this case, because it's an image, the description of the image. Okay. And of course, the same would happen for subjects, which you can customize, places. Let's see all the American Fork records that we've got here. So here we have an obituary that's mentioned in the transcription, but nowhere in the metadata or properties is American Fork mentioned. But when it's mentioned in the properties and the metadata, of course, it would have, how many times it was mentioned. So it's really cool to have the search results actually parse out where it's found in that record. Before we used to just put everything all together, and it was kind of hard to know where that particular bit of metadata or transcription text was found. So now we know we can decipher between native metadata, the extraneous information or the properties, extraneous metadata, or the transcription itself. So that's how entity extraction is so useful. Now, I like the entity extraction so much because it's a great way to advertise your material to the greater world without relinquishing the context of the data, particularly if you have a private archive. I think it's just absolutely clever to be able to tease the world with your key persons, key places, key dates, but not necessarily explain in context what's going on with the persons, places, or dates. So that's the entity extraction. So that's kind of an added bonus that you get when you use Kindex, is it's basically blatantly advertising your data without giving up all the details. So anyway, that concludes my presentation today.
Oh, good.
Um, thanks,
It
James. Do
sounds,
you have any?
it's, no, it sounds tremendously interesting. It's something that I think a lot of the people who are doing digitizing dream about, say, I wish I could do this, and I think this is kind of making that a reality. So I think that's a very helpful thing.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time, James, and we'll hope to see you again in another, maybe in another week with another video. Hopefully, we've got some other great ideas to share with you about how Kindex actually is helping people on an emotional and spiritual level and some of those stories. And that will probably be in the next video. So thank you for your
Okay,
time.
thank you.